You're listening to Ghostumentary Scary Short Stories, original pieces updated throughout the week.
Where does one dispose of a head? Ernesto had only known life through a constant veil of death. Born on the brink of the zombie apocalypse, he'd grown up amid the chaos. 25 years of rotting, groaning corpses wandering the earth, relentless carnage and survival. He was a child of horror, but somehow the breathers won, eradicating nearly all the undead. Now, 5 years later, the world was still trying to stitch itself back together. Only about 20% of humanity remained. For Ernesto, life had become a routine of rebuilding what was lost, working long hours with other quiet men in overgrown ruins and skeletal buildings. The government had issued strict laws, forbidding anyone from keeping zombie memorabilia. A single rotting finger or toe, let alone a whole corpse, was grounds for imprisonment. The fear was that someone, somewhere, could rekindle the nightmare. Ernesto had lost everyone in the war, his parents, his sister. Alone and unattached, he didn't want to risk forming connections he could lose again. So he kept to himself, poured his grief into the hard work of construction, and kept moving. One winter afternoon, Ernesto was working in the gutted basement of an abandoned hospital, clearing rubble. Broken windows cast slivers of thin light into the dark, musty space, illuminating the remnants of the old world. Cars covered in dust, some smashed beyond repair, others miraculously untouched. He came upon a dusty, dented Prius and ran his hands over its hood, feeling the nostalgia for something he'd never actually known, a time before the horror. When he walked around to the trunk, a strange green glow caught his eye in the dim light. Puzzled, Ernesto stepped closer and found a large metal case nestled in the trunk, the faint green light pulsing through a crack. It was sleek and sturdy, about 2 feet by 3, with a keypad lock that looked futuristic and out of place. Curiosity flared, and he pressed a few buttons. They beeped, and a red light blinked, then returned to green. He was alone in the basement, but he couldn't risk taking it out with him. His foreman would stop him in a heartbeat. So he stashed it in the shadows, marking the spot in his mind. At midnight, he returned. Under cover of darkness, Ernesto slipped the case out of the building and back to his apartment, along with a briefcase and a weathered lab coat he'd found beside it. Once he was home, he set the metal box on his coffee table, surveying it. Heavy, impenetrable. But he noticed a small piece of paper stuck inside the briefcase. Peter 892245. The code? Heart pounding, he punched in the numbers. A bright green light flashed, and with a metallic click, the case unlocked. Slowly, Ernesto lifted the lid, revealing a strange mist that seeped around the edges. Inside, surrounded by wires and attached to a small computer, was a human head. It lay perfectly preserved in a glass chamber, as if untouched by time. Peter was scrawled on the glass in black ink. He recoiled, heart hammering as he looked at the head, then back at the computer. Notes in the briefcase hinted at a scientist named Peter, one of the founding monsters of the zombie plague. A man who had worked to prolong life, but inadvertently created the virus that reanimated the dead. A man whose work had obliterated the world Ernesto knew. As he leaned closer, the head's eyelids twitched and snapped open. Ernesto stumbled back, almost falling, but he couldn't look away. Peter's glassy eyes were fixed on him, unblinking. The computer screen lit up, numbers flashing erratically, then settling into one word: help. Ernesto froze, unable to speak. Then, without thinking, he asked, "How?" The screen flickered with numbers before settling on the same word: help. The undead scientist's eyes followed his every move, unwavering. Ernesto's mind spun. Was Peter alive? Somehow sentient, even after all these years? The implications were horrifying. He knew what he should do: turn this into the authorities. But instead, he found himself pacing his living room, haunted by Peter's eyes on him. Finally, he gathered the courage to ask, "How do I help you?" The screen went blank, then flashed a single word: die. Ernesto shuddered, feeling a deep, icy dread. Did Peter want him to end his suffering? This disembodied head, trapped in a box for 30 years, pleading to be freed. Ernesto wasn't sure he could go through with it, but something about the agony in Peter's eyes swayed him. "I'm sorry," he whispered, reaching toward the battery connections on the box. The wires were tightly wound, tangled in a way that suggested Peter had been kept alive on purpose, tormented in his solitude. Ernesto pulled the wires, and the soft whir of the computer faded. The lights in the chamber dimmed, and Peter's eyes closed. It was over. He disposed of the glass case in a dumpster, feeling as though he'd just laid a terrible ghost to rest. The next morning, Ernesto awoke to the sounds of commotion outside. Sirens blared, and people were shouting. He ran to his window and saw 2 bodies lying on the ground, covered with white sheets. A crowd had gathered around a garbage truck parked by the dumpster. Ernesto ran downstairs. The police were keeping people back. Ernesto asked what happened. "A homeless man attacked a garbage man, I guess," a woman told him. "He attacked him by biting right through his neck. Then a woman tried to help, and the homeless man attacked her too. Killed them both." "Where is the homeless man?" Ernesto asked. "He ran off, I guess," she answered. "I guess another guy got killed too, but they only found his head." Ernesto felt his whole body shiver. She told him the police found a head, but only the head. The head's mouth was full of blood, as if it bit someone too. They're trying to figure it out. Just then, one of the bodies under the sheets started to move. Then the other. Ernesto knew what had happened. He also knew what was going to happen next. He screamed at the paramedic who was pulling up the sheet, but it was too late. The reanimated body of the garbage man bit him. Then it stood up and went after another. Panic set in as every person watching began to run. 30 years ago, Peter started a zombie apocalypse, and today he's starting another. Hopefully this one doesn't wipe out the rest of humanity.
Looking for more scary tales? Subscribe to our podcast and visit ghostumentary.com. Let us know what you think or share with us your scary tales. We might just make a new story from it.